Hello, everyone, and welcome to Building ROI into Your Media Supply Chain, a TV News Check Working Lunch webinar. We have a really interesting lineup of speakers today, and our moderator, Glenn Dixon, will be introducing you momentarily. Just a note before that, I'd like to alert you to a couple of upcoming TV News Check webinars. On July 15th, we'll be bringing speakers from CNN and the Weather Channel to talk about the state of the art in storytelling with augmented and virtual reality. On July 29th, we'll bring you a conversation about remote production, the cloud, and the future of television workflows. There are details about these on tvnewscheck.com's event calendar. Our moderator for today's webinar, and the two coming up, is veteran technology writer Glenn Dixon, who we are happy to say is contributing editor to TV News Check. Glenn, please begin when you are ready.
Thanks, Kathy. Good afternoon. Welcome to Building ROI into Your Media Supply Chain. I'm Glenn Dixon. Public cloud platforms and software as a service products have the potential to completely transform traditional television operations into a highly automated, flexible media supply chain that gives broadcasters and other media companies new capabilities and new insights into their business. But as a veteran broadcast engineer once told me, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. Today, we'll discuss the financial case for investing in cloud and SaaS technology with a panel of experts. Joining me are Dave Travis, Group Director of Content, Broadcast and Platforms for UK pay TV operator and programmer Sky. Terry Davies, SVP of Content and Media Services for in-flight entertainment firm Anuvu, formerly known as Global Legal. Evan Staton, Principal Architect for Media and Entertainment for cloud platform Amazon Web Services. And Simon Eldridge, Co-founder and Chief Product Officer of media software vendor SDVI. For the audience, we'd like to make this experience as interactive as possible. There will be some poll questions that will pop up on your screen that we'd like you to weigh in on. And please use the Q&A function to ask questions of our panelists, which we'll address towards the end. And if you're having any technical issues, please use the chat function to reach out to TV News Check publisher Kathy Haley, who's helping manage the event. Let's start with Dave Travis. Dave, can you briefly tell me about Sky's business and describe the key components of your supply chain and what you've been working to change recently?
Sure. Yeah, so at Sky, as you referenced, we are a pay TV operator. We're obviously owned by Comcast, so we work very closely with NBCU, Comcast, and the other parts of the Comcast family. But also we're a content originator and creator, we're a sports production company, and we're a news organization. So our content supply chain demands are incredibly complex. They're made up of everything from the way we plan our rights, the way we schedule our content, the way we plan the delivery, all the way through to the way we process content, the way we store content, the way we enrich our content and check our content through the end-to-end value chain. We have been on a significant journey of transformation. So it started a few years back where we evaluated different ways of transforming our organization. We sort of had a hybrid model between buying monolithic systems and building our own technology environments. But ultimately that led us to being very slow and inflexible and on, just everything that you don't want to be. So we've been on a transformation journey to move towards a sort of a software defined media supply chain. And predominantly, the ambition is moving towards the cloud, and we're on that journey. We've got lots of scars, lots of really good wins, and lots of bad experiences. But yeah, we're on the journey, and we're sort of now 2 years into it, and the future is looking incredibly bright for us.
Just following up on that, Dave, what part of your operations do you see as the most difficult to change to this new model, cloud-based technology?
Um, everything is probably a fair assessment. It sort of starts with validating those solutions. I think, initially always starts with, if you have that traditional mindset and culture, going on the journey is quite a hard undertaking, because everybody sort of starts with that waterfall mindset and trying to boil the ocean. And I think that's initially where we started. And I think we failed quite quickly at that, because we were trying to do too much too quickly. So we managed to break everything down into smaller bite-sized chunks. And we then evaluated, right, can we change the way we process content? Can we change the way we manage content first, and then address other parts of the value chain later? So we really started with the people and the architecture and what we're trying to achieve, and set a strategy that we all believed in and are working towards. So to sort of answer your question, is really around people and investment cases was where the complexity really gets. Technology, when you really get into the nuance, is actually very similar. We're all trying to achieve the same thing. But if you can't transform your people and your architecture and what you want to be in the future, it's probably difficult to evolve and go on the journey, because you're just trying to do too much at once.
Okay, and just, when you talk to US broadcasters about using the cloud, a lot of them say, well, play out is relatively easy to move to the cloud, but production is a whole nother ball of wax. What's your perspective at Sky? You have distribution for your pay TV operations too as part of your portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Doing anything on-prem is incredibly complex. And depending on where people are on their journey, I've had a lot of experience where I've done traditional on-prem technology. I've been in businesses where we built private cloud, and then I've done it in public cloud. And it's all about scale and what you're trying to achieve. The cloud now predominantly can do anything that you want it to do. It's incredibly secure. It's incredibly flexible. And if you get the right mentality in the working practices, you can scale it infinitely. And your teams can be incredibly flexible, and it's a hugely powerful asset. But equally, at the same extent, you can't go into it naively, right? Because cloud is not necessarily more cost effective from the nickels and dimes perspective. It's all around the periphery, around what you're trying to achieve, and it's around working practices. That's where the efficiencies come. You're faster, you're quicker, you're more flexible. You can scale up, you can scale down. So there are so many different complexities in terms of what, but the benefits are huge as well. So you just have to go into it with your eyes open and understand the pros and cons. And I think we're really starting to realize that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and we're going to drill down a little more into some of the cost considerations and private versus public a little later. Terry, for people who aren't familiar with Anuvu or Global Eagle, can you talk a little bit about what your company does, and then talk about the work you're doing with supply chain now, and compare it to your past experience building a digital supply chain at Sony Pictures?
Yes. Hello, everybody. So Anuvu, formerly Global Eagle, we just recently rebranded, is a global company providing content, technical services, and connectivity to the non-theatrical window. So airlines, primarily, cruise lines. We do land-based non-theatrical as well, film clubs, schools, hospitals, and even prisons. We have been on a 3-year digital transformation journey to take what was really a collection of a lot of acquired companies all doing the same thing, but in different ways, on homegrown mom and pop systems, Excel, rickety old Microsoft Access databases, you name it. Everybody was doing this at maybe 20 different companies that we acquired around the world. And we had to build a digital supply chain for end to end. So we buy content. So we had to build something where we were managing the rights of our titles in, title out, how we were selling it, how we curate it, how we program it to show up on on a United Emirates or a Singapore Airlines, for example, all the way through then compliance screening, editing, subtitling, dubbing, metadata creation, transcode, and we do all of that sort of squeezed in between receiving content from over 700 distributors around the world, ranging from the major studios right down again to sort of some digital creator somewhere in Dubai, and then delivering to all of the different aircraft fleets. I'll talk about airlines as our primary use case, to airline fleets that range in age and technology, and have different seatback systems on board, because depending on the OEM that supports that seatback system, it could be different specifications. So it's been an incredibly complex journey here, trying to wrangle what really has been a very non-standardized process, both in and out, and the transformation that we've had to go through internally to consolidate and realize synergies and standardize. But also dealing with the change management of that in pockets of different companies acquired around the world. And of course, it's very different to building a digital supply chain at Sony Pictures, where we had a large budget and a lot of time to get this done. And we were able to bring in, a large amount of consultants to write business requirements before we even started to worry about the architecture. Here, we've had to move much, much faster, and especially with COVID, because we provide content to airlines and cruises, for example, and they have not been flying and they have not been sailing. So our timeline to do this transformation suddenly shrunk last year, when we're like, oh, okay, A, it's an opportunity to accelerate quickly because we have no or few deliveries, but B, of course, we were bleeding money and we had to get it done.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I mean, obvious question for somebody whose core business is supplying airlines. What was the impact of that break basically in your business on this technology change? Was that of some, was that a silver lining to otherwise a big cloud?
I think Winston Churchill said, never waste a good crisis. And we saw it exactly as an opportunity to move very, very quickly. We have a very punishing schedule, like a cycle in this business, where every month, traditionally, content would be renewed on board the airlines. So, COVID presented a relief from that, where we could move more quickly and take some risks that we wouldn't have done otherwise.
Okay, thanks a lot. Evan, at AWS, how are what are you seeing with your customers as they look to improve on their traditional workflows? And, what business case can you make to them, for the need to invest in a software-based agile media supply chain, that we've been discussing? I know a lot of people, when they first started converting hardware to software in the broadcast industry and going to automation, just looking at headcount was an obvious thing for a lot of technology management. But is the ROI with these kind of systems, is that measured in sheer dollars, or is it something else?
It's dollars and something else, if I'm allowed to pick both. I think Dave was speaking really well about it actually before. So there's different parts of the media workflow. And if you just say, I had a pizza box and now it's software and I'm going to run it on a big honking instance or something like that, you might not save money if you just do it that way. You might, it depends on the workload, but really the people that I've seen exceed and succeed in reducing their costs are the ones that understand the microservices approach to it. And they actually will re-architect their media workflows to be sort of like the exact right tool for the job at all times, which means that you're matching your virtual infrastructure to what your business needs. So your application should be able to scale. And in doing so, if you have say nonlinear times of low transcoding or something like that, you might not be paying anything except for your assets to be in storage or be delivered. You may not have any servers to run sometimes. Now that's different for, I would say, linear workflows, especially the 24/7 ones, where something is always running, whether it be a video encoder or what have you. And so in those cases, what customers are seeing is that the benefit is in flexibility. So the speed of which technology changes is faster than the speed at which people want to change out hardware. So what ends up happening on-prem is that you buy something and you put it in, and then you have it. And new technology might come out, but you might not be able to take advantage of it right away because the thing you bought doesn't do that. In the cloud, you're able to be much more agile. So I would say, in the cases where you can breathe and scale horizontally and vertically, there's definitely a lot of cost savings opportunities. In cases where you can't, there's still value to that for customers because of the ability to adapt quickly, adopt new technology, and also find new revenue streams. So they might be able to make more money from their workflows too. For example, personalization workflows or dynamic ad insertion, stuff like that brings new revenue into customers that they didn't have before.
Okay, thanks. And we're going to follow up, a little bit on some of the change management too. I know something we talked about it. There's technology side to this discussion, and then there's a human resources side to it. Simon, wanted to give you opportunity for people who aren't familiar with SDVI. Maybe just briefly describe what your software does, and then can you talk about the conversations you're having with customers today about supply chain and maybe how they compare to 5 years ago when you were in your early stages?
Yeah, sure. So SDVI provide what we refer to as a supply chain management platform. And just as we've heard from Terry and Dave, media organizations are trying to convert what was a generic workflow into something that's more business appropriate. And really supply chain thinking is fundamentally about eliminating waste from your manufacturing process for the product that you ship. So whether you're delivering to airlines or whether you're delivering directly to viewers, understanding the cost of that processing and the cost of the manufacturing process for that product is really, really important. We just heard that Evan said very, very well, actually. Cost savings are certainly a part of it. And I think most customers who we talk to initially build their business case based on how much money can I save and how much more efficient can I be, right? Where can I remove the waste from that supply chain? But I think what most customers find having made the transition is, yeah, the savings were certainly interesting, but look what I can now do. And that's really what we're trying to enable is how can we enable our customers to be more responsive and to be more agile and to address those new business opportunities that are coming up.
Can you talk a little more detail about how you can analyze your costs? I know you said that, maybe compare what you can look at in cloud usage for functions like transcode and such compared to, the old way of buying broadcast technology where, you had a capital budget and you bought a bunch of tape decks or you bought on-prem servers and, you try to do the math on how much that costs versus how many networks maybe you were, supplying and how many hours of programming you were pumping out. But yeah, can you talk about, what you can look at now, the level of precision?
Yeah, I think the way that things used to be done was exactly as you said, right? You'd buy the infrastructure that you've acquired for your peak operations. And quite often you're not running at peak, but that was really the only way to achieve what you could do. Now, building a peak capacity system inherently means that for the majority of the time, it's underutilized and it's just sitting there and it's not doing anything. So in terms of that kind of a model on how you're going to calculate what the cost of your services are, most customers who we've spoken to, it was really as simple as, here's my capital budget, here's my operating budget, here's how many services that we provide. So I'm going to do an allocation, and I'm going to say, right, this plus this divided by 10 services, this is what my service costs to run. Now, the number of assumptions in that model are kind of ridiculous. I mean, you're assuming that all the services are using the same amount of infrastructure and that they're all fundamentally costing the same. As soon as you go to a unit cost-based model, you're not paying for the services that you're not using. So you don't have to scale for peak. And it also means that if you can look at the individual costs of every process as part of your supply chain, you can very accurately predict what's it going to cost to do a certain project. So, you know, we've had customers who, you know, the business would come to them and say, hey, we're selling this show to this platform. We've got until Friday to get it ready. And this is what revenue that represents to us. And very quickly, the technology team and the operations team can say, you know, this is what it's going to cost, and this is how long it's going to take. And then you can make an intelligent business decision about, is this a good deal?
Okay, thanks. We had the results of our first poll, which I'm gonna share. And you know, one of the things that right off the top, we asked, you know, has the impact of COVID-19 just made businesses more accepting of the need for technology changes? And that was an overwhelming yes, 83%. And looking at number two, either we have a lot of Evan and Simon's customers on as audience members, or people are farther along this journey than we think. But 67% of people said that they have a software-based, highly automated media supply chain in their organization today. And then those who answered no, 42% answered that they plan to move to one in the next 5 years. So it seems like we're not making this up. This change is happening. You know, going along that, when we talk about these changes, how important is change management with personnel compared to implementing the new technology? You know, do these new workflows require new hires? And are you able to find the talent that you need? And you know, I guess I'll throw that one to Terry first, and then everyone else can weigh in.
Change management is everything around introducing any type of change, but particularly a digital supply chain. The technology is the technology. What we did at Anuvu, because we had a short amount of time and a even shorter budget, we took the view that we were not going to build. We wanted to take the approach of building a platform from best-in-class SaaS vendors, like STVI, for example. I'm so sorry, we have a new puppy in the house. I knew that was going to happen.
He needs change management.
He needs to read the manual. So you know, we work with RightsLine as an example for our title management, and we, you know, have a number of vendors in between. So our job really became integration and configuring our workflows to fit those out of the box solutions. So change management was even more important. And really, having done this now at Sony and now at Anuvu, in this particular approach at Anuvu, the technology is not the challenge for us. The people and the process and the change required around the people and the process is everything. We early on introduced a change management program. We met with everybody involved and we said, look, you know, this is going to be the next 3 years. This is what your change cycle looks like. We are all going to go through it multiple times. We all have to hold each other accountable for understanding where we are in the cycle. So if we get, you know, some resistance or some high emotional situation, which comes every day, you know, when you're brainstorming how to change and then implementing these changes on systems and processes that haven't been challenged for years and years and years in what had previously been a very stagnant industry, you need to be able to pinpoint where people are and helpfully and unemotionally say, you're reacting to change here. I need you just to take a beat and be more objective about, you know, what's the right thing to do here. So up and down the supply chain, regardless of whether it's Sony Pictures or Anuvu or any other company, I do not believe you will succeed unless you pay proper attention to change management. And I think also moving forward on any change as well, it's important to have new thinking and legacy thinking. You can't just throw away the playbook on a company, an industry like ours and think we know better and we're just going to design the way we think it should be done. You really have got to respect that legacy knowledge that comes from years in an industry that's important and needs to be a voice at the table when you're designing how to reconfigure for these out-of-the-box solutions. So for me, change management was the absolute key. And, I'm leading the charge. And by creating this sort of change management language and making it safe for people, as soft as it sounds, people are able to challenge me as well. It's easy being the instigator of change, but sometimes other people's ideas challenge your own idea. So we've created an environment where people can say, hang on a minute, you're in the yellow zone right now. I think you need to recognize why you're resisting this particular suggestion. It works for us.
Good, thank you. Dave, can you talk a little bit about how you've managed, the personnel side of this at Sky, and maybe talk about, training or reorganization that you may have done?
Sure. I mean, this is a challenging area, right? You need to take the traditional skill sets that you have and take them on the journey. And much to Terry's point, they're kind of instrumental. They know where all your skeletons are. They know why things are done in a certain way. So you need them. But at the same time, you need expertise around architecting in the cloud. And that's where the first challenge comes in. Because anybody who's any good typically works for Evan and his crew, or Google, Facebook, or any of the other cyber and social media giants and internet, what have you. So we try and recruit, but when you're fighting for the talent, it's difficult. So the next avenue is really upskilling your current team, or trying to change people that have similar competencies, but maybe don't come from your industry. So architecting in the cloud is important. You either need to work with a systems integrator or you need to develop your own talent. It's the bottom line, I think. And then when you're in the cloud and you give your teams that sort of license to deploy in a very flexible and agile manner and sort of very much follow those DevOps practices, as long as you put the guardrails in and you've architected it well and you leveraged all the best practice that you can get from people like Amazon and etc., there you can do infinite amount of things. And you go on this journey of just and eventually those guys that you call your traditional guys become your evangelists, and they're the guys that are leading from the front. So you can take the team to the future. You just need to provide the pathway, and the pathway is a little bit of the challenge because of the talent required around deployment and management of expertise in the cloud. But once you're there, it's happy days.
Yeah, the one thing I'd add, I completely 100% agree. This is a business transformation journey as much as it is a technology transformation journey. But one really nice way to think about that sort of that change management process is this is an opportunity for people, right? People who have maybe worked in one particular technology field for a long time, this allows them to grow as well, right? This allows them to learn new skills and new technologies, and I think that's rewarding for people.
Yeah, thanks. Evan, what do you tell customers about the change that's required? Does working in the cloud just require a new mindset from existing employees, or does it require new talent, being brought on board?
Both, I think, is the right answer, because I'm going to echo what everybody else just said. You can't just abandon everything we've learned over the past 100 years in TV. So, if you bring in a whole bunch of new people, they'll probably build something really interesting, but they'll probably miss a lot of stuff that they can't see because of all that experience. So you need to do both. I think existing broadcast engineers who are part of the media supply chain throughout the world should, level up, I think somebody said, and learn more about software development, and being agile and what continuous deployment means. At the same time, I do think there's a need to bring new development talent into organizations that have a different background. And I think it's the combination of those two things, like sort of training DevOps people in video and training video people in DevOps. And when you combine that, I think something magical will happen. And
Couldn't agree more.
yeah. The other thing, Glenn, do you mind if I talk about the change management question that we touched on a few minutes ago?
Yeah, no, go right ahead.
I think there's something really interesting there as well, which is that, so I came from the broadcast background, right? Before I was at AWS, I worked at NBC for 5 years. Before that, I worked at BAMTech. And there's one thing I've learned that's consistent across all broadcasters. Change management is painful. And it's painful because of how careful everybody has to be all the time, because the system reliability must be 5 nines or better. And that's a worldwide thing. Everybody says 5 nines are better. And in order to maintain that, you need an extremely rigorous change management process. I'm talking about redundant everything, sometimes redundant buildings too. You might be running quad redundancy in some cases just because you don't want somebody to, trip over a wire or something as simple as that and take you off the air. So what ends up happening, like the day-to-day result of that rigor results in fairly simple changes having to happen at 3 a.m, on Saturday nights and stuff like that. People developing complex change management scripts and going through, step by step what the changes are, and, then having rollback plans. And there's so much rigor put around it because we need to stay reliable. But in the cloud, I think there's an opportunity to make this a lot easier on everybody. And the reason for that is, I'll give you an example. Suppose a customer has 2 encoders in a redundant configuration, 1+1, and they want to introduce a new version of software that has a feature that they wanted. Well, it's risky to go and upgrade them because you might not know the behavior of what's going to happen with that new software version. But it's also risky to install another box in the rack and draw more power and pull cables and stuff like that. But in the cloud, you can literally spin up a 3rd one without risking anything at all. Leave your production system intact, spin up a 3rd one, test it out, and then if you like it, promote it into production, and then eventually demote the ones that you want to turn off. And in doing so, I think that broadcasters could be way more reliable than they are now, because it takes all of those sort of human oops moments out of the equation, because you can test it completely offline. So I think we'll see more of that.
Can I add to that? It's I couldn't agree more. And this is where this blending of DevOps and traditional thinking comes into play. And, software delivery teams think completely differently. They always learn fast, fail fast, and they never look back. Whereas broadcast engineers are always trying to find every reason why it's going to be a problem and try and mitigate that before you've got there. But you just can't predict everything. And I think the cloud and software development methodologies blended with the traditional mindset is a nice compromise. And that you need that mindset and belligerent approach of, we just got to keep moving forward. We're going to move forward. We're never going to roll back. We're only going forward. And that is a big change for some parts of the organization. When they get there, it's great.
Yeah, thank you. We've been talking a lot about the cloud and particularly public cloud, but I wanted to throw this to Simon. Does creating a cost-effective, efficient media supply chain, does that require moving from traditional on-premise equipment to the public cloud or a private data center, or can you do it with what you have in place?
So when we started on this journey, I think our assumption was that customers would start maybe more in a kind of a private cloud or hybrid model, and gradually over time, maybe migrate to public clouds, right? So, the idea that you could say, well, I'm going to build a private cloud, which is my average load, and I'm going to deal with the peaks via a public cloud. That isn't the way that it's panned out. And I think most customers start in public cloud, And I think they realize that once they're there, the idea of then going back to capital investments to build infrastructure simply doesn't make sense. The whole ability to be able to pay for what you're using and align the cost of your processes with the revenue that you're generating kind of flies in the face of capital infrastructure. Now, there are exceptions to that, and I think one of those is continuing to sweat the physical assets that you've got, right? So software licenses that you've already invested in, or infrastructure that isn't end of life potentially yet. So you end up in some kind of hybrid situations there.
Okay, thanks. Dave, do you want to weigh in on the private versus public cloud?
Yeah, I mean, when the guys talked about it earlier, and I was going to chip in, when we built a private cloud in my previous organization, I think we spent more time worrying about our capacity than anything else. Simon talked about managing your peak, but we used to oversubscribe and build, but it was never enough. And then you're always trying to justify why do you need more, and you spend all of your life in commercial meetings, not really doing what you were intended for the organization and what your skill set is. So, there's many reasons why private cloud is good for certain static workloads, but certainly my experience is unless you're a business of significant scale and you're not just doing media workflows, you're doing telco workflows, or you've got CDN requirements and or all sorts of different home automation, whatever it is, I think it's hard to make private cloud pay, because what you're looking for there is everything that you get from people like Amazon and Google, but with all the headache of your own hardware capacity, patching, security, and then the refresh of all of that estate. So the time you've actually delivered it, you're then back to rebuilding it again. And I think it's a false economy. When you really look at TCO and dive into it, it's the cost of the bleach that goes down the bathrooms that you manage in your data center. That's the level of granularity. It's the parking spaces, it's the security guard. And quite often I see comparisons of TCO between on-prem and cloud. I have this sort of theory and formula I sort of adhere to. If it's 20% or 30% more expensive in the cloud will be more efficient because of the peripheral, unquantifiable financial benefits, which you just can never, because again, someone else mentioned this, when you talk to a financial person or your CFO, he wants to tell me why it's going to be, you can't put your finger on it, but when you're actually doing it, it is more efficient. And I can give a very good example. At Sky, for all sorts of reasons, we create up to 60 different renditions for our OTT platforms. And sometimes we have issues and we have to refresh that content. That used to take us months and months and months, and now it takes us minutes.
Yeah. And that flexibility,
maybe a day to be really fair, but yeah.
And that's worth paying for sometimes for the extra computing power when you need to turn a job.
100%. It's about the flexibility.
Evan, I wanted to run this by you. I would imagine you would be a proponent of public cloud over private, given your employer. But one of the interesting things that AWS has been doing is they've actually been bringing the cloud a little closer to some of their big customers. They first had local zones in LA for the post-production community to have the compute a little closer for latency sensitive applications like editing graphics. And then and now you have what's called outposts, which are basically pieces of your equipment running in some customers' premises. Can you explain the thinking behind that, how that works, and maybe talk about the role that some of that on-premise technology has in the industry's overall move to a cloud-based supply chain?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the name of the game here is flexibility. So we like to talk about how flexible cloud technology is and how you can scale stuff up and down, but it's really about flexibility from the perspective of the customer. And customers sometimes, for various reasons, need to run things closer to where they are. And sometimes that means like a local zone, which might be in your same city. One example of that is a requirement for extremely low latency workflows. So for example, customers may have a local station in a metro or something like that, and they may be interested in doing a live video production or something like that. So in that case, depending on where you are in the country, you might be, 1,000 miles away from the nearest region or something like that. And that might blow your latency budget in certain cases. So you might want to run something closer to where you are. The same is true for like wavelength zones, which are embedded into 5G carrier networks. You may have people that are trying to access your application within a metro, and your application might have extremely low latency requirements. So having them pull all the way from the region might be too far. So this is about flexibility for customers to run where they want to run. And then on the outpost one, that one's interesting to me because it actually implies that it's running within the customer facility. And that might seem at first counterintuitive to running in the cloud, but actually what I've learned that customers like about it is they get a consistent operational experience then. So for example, there are cases where for regulatory reasons, content might have to stay within a country or something like that. And so therefore they might have to run their compute on that certain content where they are, but they might have other parts of their media workflow that are running in region, and Outpost is a way for them to have a consistent API and development experience regardless of where technically the content lives. So customers have seen benefit in that way. And then the other way is stepping stones. So customers, it's pretty rare that a customer will say, we're going to shut down our whole data center and go all in a region. It's usually a step-by-step type of approach. And one of those steps might be, we need to get our feet wet with the AWS console, EC2 APIs, stuff like that, but we're not ready to like completely do everything remotely. And so Outpost provides a stepping stone for some customers to try it out without being uncomfortable.
And it sounds like it's almost a little bit of a training mechanism too, right? That personnel can learn to run the run the software they would be running in the public cloud, but have the comfort level that they're actually running something that's on site. And then once they realize it really doesn't matter, it's where it's running, then their comfort level goes up.
That's true. And, big asterisk here, every customer is different. So there's some people that look at it as I want to learn more about the cloud, and this is a way into that. And there's other customers that say, no, this particular workflow needs to be wherever I am for some reason, and I want to manage it like the rest of my stuff. So, an Outpost makes it look and feel the same.
Okay, thank you. One thing we haven't, the last time I did a panel that was talking about cloud issues, we spent a lot of time talking about metadata, and we haven't discussed that yet, but I wanted to throw that to Terry first. How much of a challenge is metadata when you're trying to create this efficient supply chain for your business?
So I think there's metadata within your supply chain, and really understanding what your source of truth is and how that's going to travel up and down your supply chain. And then we have the issue, as I'm sure everybody on this panel does, of delivering very complex metadata. So first of all, we're very, very focused on the importance of metadata up and down our supply chain and really understanding the source of truth. And that's really, when you think about how I described that we built our supply chain, it's really understanding which piece of the supply chain we're going to use as source of truth. IDA, for example, is incredibly important to us as a unique identifier for every title that comes in from studios and other distributors and is then delivered to the airlines and is used as that unique identifier in our world. And then the issue of metadata out, again, going back to the non-standardized OEMs and seatback systems, you know, we have heavy, heavy penalties with the airlines for anything that's incorrect. So we live or die by that metadata that we deliver, that shows up on the GUI on the seatback. And, you know, it's probably the straggler in our, we're 100% in the cloud, but talking about process, metadata is probably top of our list in this next quarter, to really unravel that and put it back together again in a more efficient way, because it just it's such an important piece of what we deliver. I'm sure it's the same for Dave. You've got to get it right, and it's critical and elusive in being able to be automated in some of the deliverables that we have to manage.
Thanks. Yeah, Dave, I mean, how much of a challenge is it for Sky, and are you trying to, you know, pursue some sort of universal system across your properties?
Yeah, metadata, as Terry said, it's like it's your gold. It's more important to some degree than it's more important than the content in itself, to get the consumer to the content. And without it, if it's wrong, the way we do voice search across our different platforms, the way we navigate people, the way we link from social media through to content, it's its own user journey in its own right. And with the volume of content we have, it's just massively important. It has been a challenge. This is one area where we've been extremely lucky to leverage our parent company, and we have been on a journey of centralizing our metadata process flow across Comcast. So all of our different businesses share the same metadata model, and we have that integrated with SDVI. So the way we receive content from the studios, the way we unpack the content, the way we enrich the content, and those processes we're standardizing. And then that then flows all the way through to the way we onboard our applications, because, you know, we're a big organization and we've had some terrible situations where we're doing integrations with one studio 6 or 7 different times on the input side, and then we're outputting it, you know, 6 or 7 different ways, because we're sending the way we do it to OTT, the way we do it in different countries, or the different pay platforms, was incredibly time consuming. So we put a lot of energy now into centralizing that approach, and we really are starting to see the benefits of that, because you integrate once and distribute multiple times.
Yeah, thanks. Simon, you know, how have you seen your customers? I mean, Dave talked about what Sky's doing with metadata across your broader customer base. Is the way people are approaching that, has it changed? Are there other customers pursuing that sort of universal metadata system as a goal?
I think most people understand the importance of metadata, but I'm not sure everybody necessarily understands what you can get back from having that data, right? So Terry and Dave have both talked about the deliverables of metadata, right? So the data that you receive on the way in at the beginning of your supply chain, and then the data that you have to deliver on the way out. I think there's a class of metadata which is also really focused on business efficiency and revenue generation. So for example, if you're processing thousands of items, and you know where they have to be and when they have to be, you can use that metadata to prioritize how your content is actually flowed through the supply chain. So you can do things like, you know, make sure that the content gets to the right place at the right time. And then I think on the back end, being able to mine that data to be able to say, okay, so, you know, for this particular project, how long did it take and how much did it cost? And being able to do allocations across the services that you provide and the projects that you're doing, I mean, that is still fundamentally data about the content and data about the historic processing.
Okay, thanks. Evan, would you like to weigh in on this? You know, what does Amazon advise customers when it comes to their approach to metadata across the enterprise?
It's a good question. Thanks. One of the things that we've found is that metadata is just as valuable as the video itself. And that was, I think it took a while to learn that, because at first everybody's like, my assets are my assets. This is my bread and butter. But then it turns out that keeping track of metadata better and collecting more metadata, maybe using like AI/ML services, for example, just to extract as much data as you can from your content library, results in new ways of selling. So we encourage customers to extract as much data as they can and store it in databases and make sure that it's secure, because again, that the metadata is valuable. It has to be as secure as the content, and you need to do a good job keeping track of it.
Okay. That time-based AI data can obviously be used to drive things like content discovery, but it can also be used to drive efficiency in the supply chain even further, right? So things like content compliance, where you need to find all the violence or find all the bad language in a piece of content. That was traditionally something that was done by people. And whilst people are perfectly capable of doing that, the types of volumes that customers are now dealing with, it's just not scalable to add that many people to process that much content. So using that metadata to guide and inform the operations group is really valuable.
Yeah, we're also looking at exploiting that same type of technology sort of further upstream back in the production processes. When we do when we do remote production and we're capturing a Premier League football match, we are recording lots and lots of material, which is great. But at the same time, it's the most inefficient archive you ever come across, because it's full of like a guy cleaning the lens on his camera, or a horse racing event where there's no horse racing going on because it's raining. We can use the AI and computer vision and the metadata to filter out our archives. And when you're talking an archive 150 petabytes, we can then look to how we can more efficiently store content and sort of produce it. So there's so much value to the way you use metadata to be more efficient.
Dave, you mentioned your archive, and obviously, what controls the archive for a lot of big media companies is their MAM, their media asset management system. Can you talk about the role that plays in Sky's supply chain, and how you balance it against, your different requirements?
We took a philosophy quite early on into our cloud transformation journey, rightly or wrongly, to abstract a lot of the different systems away from each other. We don't believe in monolithic ownership between one system or another, and that one-to-one relationship. So the way our archive is managed is by having a sort of a storage content management layer, which talks all the different protocols and languages, which then will talk to the likes of SDVI, just like our metadata schema talks to SDVI, and it talks to all our other systems, right? We've got Avid Media Central, we've got a different production asset management system, and by abstracting means we're not locked into any one vendor, and we can change and flex the way we do things very easily. And we, one of the major things that SDVI gives us is working with transcode vendors. We used to do lots of one-to-one integrations and be pretty integrated, which made it very difficult to change. With SDVI, we have a federated model. We interchange the different technologies under the hood pretty quickly, which means our commercial negotiations take a completely different flavor. It's not like lock me in for free 5 years. What we say is, you give us the best price, we'll give you the volume if you give us the best quality. If that starts dipping off, we'll chuck you out and we'll bring in another vendor. So the landscape in terms of your commercial negotiation changes massively when you're on this journey, and leveraging the different types of technology, and when you can abstract the different parts of the one-to-one integration away from each other.
Okay, thanks. We're talking about cloud storage and transcoding and SaaS products, but how much do you guys have to deal with just legacy formats, old stuff like videotape, in the course of your everyday business? How much are you still tethered in that legacy television business and its technology. Terry, take that one.
I'm smiling because just last week I was walking around our brand new building down in Santa Ana, and I was looking at a pile of 1-inch tapes and wondering why they were there. We still supply VHS and Hi8 to the Army, right? We still have airlines that take videotape, and this has been one of a really difficult balance to manage. We can't walk away from our customers and say, hey, we're not interested in providing that format. We're just going to do the new shiny digital stuff because we've built our digital supply chain. We need to honor both. And we've struggled over the last year to balance that as we've had to make some difficult decisions during COVID. But we found a way through it. And yes, we provide everything from VHS through to, 4K files. And I that certainly in my window, my non-theatrical window, that will be around for a little while yet, I think.
Dave, how much do you still have to deal with videotape on an everyday basis?
I won't say a number, but it's we have a lot, a surprising amount, and I haven't yet got the official number, but I heard a number of hundreds of thousands, multiples of hundreds of thousands punted around. It may just sit there and will never be ever used again, but it's fairly significant, and it's there for all sorts of reasons, for news, for sports. I am pushing and trying to get us to the point where we can digitize all of it, and we have built some new facilities to do that. And I guess over the coming years, hopefully we can really make tape lists, which as an industry we spoke about for God knows when. I think 15 years ago there was talk of tape lists, but I suspect everybody's in a similar position.
I think as well for videotape assets that we're all holding, and obviously I hold a lot less than Dave will, it's scary stuff, right? Because the temptation is just to say, oh, for God's sake, just, let's look forward to file, and we don't need that stuff, get rid of it. But it's been given to us by somebody, that content owner paid for that videotape to come to us. So we have to honor that. There's no easy way to deal with this. You've really got to understand what that videotape inventory is for fear of destroying an asset that you really shouldn't have destroyed. So it's an albatross for quite a while, I think, until we figure out how to get through this.
Okay, thanks. Well, if your archive isn't on videotape going forward, then you're storing it digitally somewhere as a file, and maybe you're doing it in a a digital tape library, a silo. Maybe you're doing it in the cloud. Can we talk about the costs of storing your content in the cloud? And has that become less expensive? That was the first objection I heard from broadcasters about not wanting to put their thoughts have changed in the last couple of years. But if we get all our content in the cloud, that's where our archive is, we're going to pay all these egress charges when we need it. And Dave, what's your take on that? Has that
it's a topic of debate, very much so at the moment for us. I think for all the reasons talked about earlier, depending on your scale, there is egress costs. But I think if you can get the right deal, you can sort of balance them off against each other. I think it's obviously concerning because you can't necessarily quantify your egress, and there's a lot of mathematical equation that goes into, are you bringing it on-prem or are you not? If you go all in cloud, egress doesn't obviously become a problem. And if you're not, it's about a scaling situation. So if you're in a certain threshold, cloud is the answer. Where we're at it is the magnitude more that we have to pay for content is challenging, and the read-write access costs are challenging. So I don't believe the cloud is fully there at the maturity level of understanding what is required for the media sector just yet. I do know Amazon and others are really working hard to make it right, but there's still a bit of a journey to go. So give you a quick answer. Cloud is the right way at the sort of lower tier size of broadcaster. When you have astronomical volume, that becomes 3, 4, 5 times the cost a year than it would over 10 years. So you've got to be a bit cautious around your strategy and your approach. But we have a version of our content sitting in the cloud at all times, so we can do things like Simon talked about with AI and ML and etc. But our archive, we shall see.
Evan and Simon, care to weigh in on that? We're just wrapping up, so just some final thoughts. I think
yeah, I mean, we've worked with multiple customers who have done the financial analysis of, you know, which one is cheaper or which one is most cost effective. I think there to Dave's point about the bleach in the bathrooms in the data center, managing a physical archive is not free. It's not, okay, I've bought a library and I've bought the tapes and I've bought some drives. Those things also need replacing, and they need maintaining, and they need someone to run them, and they need somewhere to be. I think many customers that we've worked with have got to the point where they understand that if you are going all in, it is a much more cost-effective thing to do, but it also provides revenue opportunities because you've then got accessibility and knowledge about what you've actually got in your archive.
Okay, thanks. And last word, we're talking about how much this costs. I'll give Evan a stab at, you know, answering.
Sure. I can say, you know, prices aren't static. AWS has reduced costs. I think the number is 106 times since we started all this. So it's going down. The other thing that helps a lot is new codecs come out that are, it seems like every generation of codec is half as big as the one before. So an archive that used to be 10 petabytes is now only 5. So that combined with the shrinking cost over time and more storage options, like, you know, how many tiers of S3 do you want, for example? There's more options there. So you can definitely fine tune it, and the technology is always getting better. So if we haven't hit the tipping point where it makes complete sense now, we will soon. But to Simon's point, running on-prem is not free. I think people often, especially with the big tape libraries, forget that real estate costs money and cooling costs money and power costs money. And like, I'm not going to say that having a TCO analysis is easy. It's not. But I've also found that a lot of people or a lot of customers haven't fully committed to the full TCO when they're looking at it. They're like, well, my tape library costs this much to buy, you know, and put over here. S3 costs this much. What gives? But really, if you take all of the things into account, like the space, the cooling, the power, the people to maintain it, all of that, and also the reliability of drives failing, like Simon said, I think you find that the value is definitely there.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks. Thanks for those thoughts, and for everyone's time on the panel. It seems that we've run through our hour and a little bit over, but it's been a very interesting conversation. I hope our audience has learned a few things. I know I have, and thanks again for all of my panelists' participation. And wish everyone a good afternoon or evening, depending where you are.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care.